Thank you, guys. Good morning. It is good to be with you, South Hills. I love Chris and as they really are. Dear friends, and South Hills has been good friends to us. My church in Santa Ana, Emmaus Church, you guys played a crucial part, really, in us getting through the last year and a half through COVID. We were meeting in a high school, and then we weren't able to meet there anymore, and we were sort of out of options. We had done stuff in backyards and living rooms, and nothing was really working. And you guys lent us this building on Sunday nights, and you let us be a part of VBS. And just as a pastor, you want to be able to offer as much as you can to the people that are calling your church home. And that was just stuff we couldn't do. We couldn't meet the needs of the families that we had, no matter how bad we wanted to. And South Hills was a part of that. So truly, thank you so much for your participation in that. We love you guys. We're super, super grateful. I'm happy to be here this morning, and I'm just a guest, and I love that you've got a guest worship leader today. You've got me, so if you guys don't like today, just come back next week. There's going to be a party. There's burgers, face painting. There's going to be games. They're just like, hey, guys, just survive this week, and next week we will reward you. Just don't even worry about it. Those guys, don't sweat it. As a guest here, I didn't grow up in church, and so I came into those doors. The entire experience was new. The worship, the singing, the hand-raising, the people who were just gleefully happy Chick-fil-A employee type people stationed around the building to say hello, say hi, welcome you, let you know that you were the best. And, you got the birthday treatment when you showed up at church. And everyone was happy and smiling. And the songs were about love and grace and mercy and forgiveness and God. And that wasn't my experience at the time. That didn't reflect where I was in my life. I wasn't sure about God. I definitely wasn't sure about the pastor. I hadn't read the Bible. I didn't know if he was teaching me what was actually in there or if he was making something up. I had no idea. And so I just want to make clear my intentions for you this morning. As someone who isn't the regular teacher here, who isn't walking through life alongside you guys the way that Chris and the way that Ez are. So I just want to be clear about, hey, here's my hope. Here's what I've been praying for you this morning. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey, whether you've been a believer in God and Jesus for 20 years, if you grew up in church, going to children's ministry and VBS, and worship has been a normal part of your life, whether that's where you are or whether you're new, maybe you've got questions, maybe you've got concerns, maybe you're actually not new to church, but you're trying to go to church again after some church pain. Let me just say kudos to you for being here. The fact that you would be here. What kind of faith does it take to go back to a place where you've experienced hurt, and yet you're trying again this morning? Wherever you are, you could say, I'm here because someone bribed me with lunch and coffee after. Great, I'm glad you're here too. Because while you might still be making a decision about God and about church and about South Hills, we've made our decision about you. You matter. You're made in God's image. You have inherent, irrevocable value that can't be taken away. No matter what you believe this morning, you don't suddenly become valuable when you start to agree with me or what I believe. You're not suddenly on the good team on the right side and now you matter. No. Whether you agree with anything I say this morning, you matter. We hope to treat you as someone who does. We hope to honor who you are and where you are and love you while you're here with us. And maybe be that excited by the end. I don't know. It's kind of high expectations. I don't know if I'm going to get you that hyped, but we're going to try. I'm going to pray for us. We'll jump into the content for today. God, thank you for this morning. Would you be with us? God, this time is really only made powerful by you. I don't know the stories that are in the room, around the room. I don't know what people are bringing in, and I don't have the means to provide for those needs. I really don't. But you do. And so, God, would you meet us here wherever we are, and would you direct us and draw us to you? So we thank you, Lord. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Everybody said amen. So you guys have been going through a series on friendship, on how to make great friends, on the importance of friendship in a time where we experience loneliness despite being connected on Facebook and Instagram, and seeming like we live in a place where we be very, very connected, we still experience this need for friendship, connection with other people. And so we've been talking about that. And now we're going to continue this conversation about friendship and we're going to talk about forgiveness. Because Chris always gives me the light, easy topics like forgiveness. He'll have me back in a few months to talk about sex, I'm sure, and then money at some other point. But today we're going to talk about this really light topic of forgiveness. Thank you, Chris. I hope you're watching online. Thank you. I love you so much. Forgiveness is going to be a necessary part of any flourishing relationship that you're going to have. It's impossible to have a lasting, significant, flourishing, and healthy relationship apart from it. In order for your relationship to endure, in order for it to really be rich, there's a requirement of being close to people, being close emotionally, being able to be more of who you are, to be known, to actually be known for who you are, what you care about, what you love, what you value. And as you get close, we all know that inevitably there's going to be some experience of pain or loss or hurt. So whether you're a Christian or not this morning, when it comes to forgiveness and your experience of it, we all have some experience with it. So whether we've read the Bible, whether we know what Jesus says about forgiveness, everyone has some framework for what it is, whether it was explicitly taught to you or whether it was experienced at home. Hey, this is what forgiveness looked like in my family. This is what forgiveness has looked like in friendships. It looks like we don't talk about it, we just sort of move on. I don't know what it looks like for you, but in order, I think, to have a healthy and helpful conversation in church, specifically in church, about forgiveness, we have to really get rid of our assumptions. Because we all have some framework, these different varying definitions of what it is. But because forgiveness is such a central part of our message, that God loves you, that God has forgiven you, he's not holding you accountable for every wrong you've ever done. You've got a clean slate. Forgiveness is the message. It's put on bumper stickers and t-shirts and art that hangs in your bathroom, because that's when you need to know you're forgiven, right? It is the central thing, and yet we have a lot of assumptions about it. And really, when we leave assumptions in that conversation, it creates opportunity for there to be hurt. Because when we talk about, hey, forgiveness is something that we do, or we need to do even, we all leave those doors thinking, well, I've got to go do this. This is what the pastor told me to do. He told me to forgive. Well, I didn't hear that. Forgiveness looks like this to me. So I want to make sure that we're on the same page. So I need to start that framework off by what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness, first and foremost, is not excusing what's happened. Sometimes we believe that in order to forgive something, I have to say, oh, it's okay, it's not a big deal, it's fine. We sort of have to condone it or endorse it even. Forgiveness is not about condoning or saying it's okay, it's not a big deal, it's fine. It's not brushing past it, it's not invalidating your pain or your experience. Forgiveness is also not the absence of consequence. You can forgive someone and there can still be necessary consequences. There can still be new boundaries that need to come in to practice and into play. On the small end of the spectrum, these boundaries can be, these minor adjustments into how frequently you talk to someone or what you talk to them about. Well, I was hurt, and while I forgive you, I'm not going to share as much or the same until we rebuild that relationship and that trust. And consequences can look as tangible as, I forgive you, and I still need to make a phone call. The cops still need to be called. Things still need to be played out. Because it can be that real. I've been in church long enough, been a pastor long enough, going to school to be a marriage and family therapist. The things that people deal with, there are still consequences that can need to occur, and forgiveness doesn't nullify that. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Forgiveness can be a one-player game, so to speak. Reconciliation, a relationship coming back together, it being mended where it was ruptured, that takes two people. But my practice of forgiveness does not require that they're a part of it. So if your intention today is to go and forgive, if you hear today's message and you're like, I want to begin that process, it doesn't require that that relationship goes back to the way that it was. It doesn't require that we're friends and hunky-dory and everything's okay. Because again, forgiveness is not the same as being reconciled. That takes two people. Forgiveness can be one person. And lastly, forgiveness is not practiced or experienced like a light switch. One of the things that we have to be careful about in church is that we can create a black and white world. But who here lives out a black and white experience? Is your life not more complicated than that? Is there not gray, and is there not nuance? And so our practice of forgiveness also has to be nuanced. It's not simply, I flipped that switch, you're forgiven, or you're not. It really is this longer, more involved and engaged process. I'm going to explain why that's really, really important. Because when we talk about forgiveness or forgiving losses and pain and hurt that has happened and occurred to us, happens on a spectrum. What do I mean that it happens on a spectrum? I mean there is the pain or inconvenience that's caused by someone being late. You were late, we had this meeting, you were late. Not only were you late, but you showed up late, like with Starbucks. Just complete disrespect. Fine, you're late, but clearly you had time to stop and get a drink. And by the way, you didn't get me a drink. Problems. That's one end of the spectrum. Honey, I asked you to take meat out of the freezer so we could have something to eat tonight, and you did not do that. Talking about somebody, I don't know who, but somebody. That's another part of it. There is, farther down the spectrum, betrayal, even if it's a small experience of betrayal. Hey, that half lie that you told me, that broke trust. There was trust that was lost there, or respect. Or hey, it wasn't the content of the message you were sending me. We've all heard the phrase, it's not what you said, but it's how you said it, right? It's not actually what you said. What you said was fine, but the way you said it made me feel like a child. It made me feel like less than I am. It made me feel small, insignificant, unimportant, and like I don't matter. That's a loss. And then here on the far end, some of our experiences, there are experiences of people in the room this morning where that pain and that loss was experienced because someone crossed a boundary without your consent. It could be emotional, relational. Hey, you said that to me and I never gave you permission to talk to me that way, but you said it, and there was significant pain and loss there. It could be a physical boundary that was crossed. But do you see how pain and hurt are experienced on a spectrum from, hey, you were late, hey, you forgot about this thing, to significant hurt that can be felt over months, years, a lifetime? So if we're going to have a meaningful conversation about forgiveness, we can't act like all pain's the same, right? Because if you leave here today and your goal is to mend some small pains, that's a different undertaking than it is to wrestle through this thing that has walked with you, this scar you've had for a really, really long time. And so I don't want to jump into the conversation where you think that I view them the same, because I don't, and neither does God. So the way that God would talk to you about these smaller issues and the pain you wish wasn't there is completely different. God doesn't say, hey, it's a light switch, let it go. Hey, you got to be reconciled. Hey, it's not a big deal. It's okay. We have to create space for that nuance. Or our conversations about forgiveness aren't as powerful as they're supposed to be. We're going to look at one story that Jesus tells, one whole story. In Matthew chapter 18, he's talking about forgiveness, and it's spurred on by this question that one of his followers asks. Peter says, how many times should I forgive my brother or sister? Actually, it says it this way, Matthew 18, starting verse 21. Peter approached him and asked, Lord, how many times must I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? As many as 7 times. I tell you, not as many as 7, Jesus replied, but 70 times 7. And if Peter didn't roll his eyes, Lord knows I would have. How many times? Jesus says, all the times. Okay, thanks. Really helpful. I'll make sure to come back with more pressing questions for more riveting answers. How often should I forgive? Always. Cool, thank you. How helpful is that for you? Is it helpful for me? Not really. Was Jesus' intention to not be helpful? No, but I think he's pointing out a glaring assumption in Peter. Peter's asking about the frequency of the thing. How often should I do this? And Jesus is about to illuminate, you're asking how often you should, but I don't think you actually understand the thing you're discussing. You're talking about how often do I need to forgive. I don't think you actually know what forgiveness is to begin with. So before we talk about frequency, let me give you a picture of what it is. And he tells Peter this story. Now, as you get into this story, Jesus was an excellent teacher in that he talked to them in terms they would have understood. He's painting a picture, and all of the picture makes sense except for a part of it, the part that he wants to highlight, the part that he wants to teach about. And so he tells this story. In verse 23, it says, "For this reason, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle accounts, the one who owed him 10,000 talents, this would have been millions and millions of dollars, was brought before him. And since he did not have the money to pay it back, his master commanded that he, his wife, and his children, and everything he had be sold to pay the debt." We're having a forgiveness conversation, remember? But this sounds like a money talk. We're talking about forgiveness occurring in relationships. Peter begins with, how often should I forgive my brother or sister? And Jesus starts talking about a king and a servant and their money issues. In all of your efforts to forgive or rupture something that's been broken, we're having a conversation about loss and about debt. Hey, when you did that, I lost something. When you said that, respect was lost, or trust was lost, or value was lost, or time was lost. The time and effort and energy that I gave to you in this relationship is lost now. The time we spent building this thing, when you lied, undercut it, and now it feels like it's been lost. Jesus is still talking about forgiveness, but he's introducing this idea of it has to do with who owes what and who's paying for it. Hey, you owe me. Now it's time to deal with that debt. And he goes on in verse 26, and it says, "At this the servant fell face down before him and said, 'Be patient with me, and I will pay you everything.' Then the master of the servant had compassion, released him, and forgave him the loan." Such a nice church story. Isn't that so cute? Anyone here have any banks forgiving them of their $1 million loans? No interest, no payment plan, no future discussions down the road, no signing any documentation. Just, hey, I know you owed me millions. I know you can't pay it back. It's fine. It's okay. You don't worry about it. While we smile and say, yeah, this is great. This is how a church story should go. Is that your lived experience? Would it have been their lived experience? Would kings have been in the business of forgiving their servants? And when I say forgiving, I mean going into a deficit for those who they viewed as less than them. Because the deficit still exists, right? The king can say, you're forgiven. Somebody's still out millions. There's still loss. There are still resources that were there that are no longer there, and that's creating problems. Because whenever we forgive, we're talking about a loss, and even if you forgive, does the loss go away? If you're like, man, I forgive you, there's still a deficit, isn't there? There's still time that's not being paid for, but it's still gone. And that's why they would have all said, I don't know, Jesus, this isn't how it works. Kings don't do this. And then the story goes on. And in verse 28, it says, that servant, the one who had been forgiven, he went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him and started choking him and said, pay what you owe. I'm not going to ask anyone to confess. You don't got to raise a hand. But when someone has taken something from you, there's a tendency inside of us to want to say, pay me what you owe me. Is there not? For those who have hurt us, there's a desire to say, pay what you owe. Give it back. I want it back. I want the time back. I want that season of my life back. I want the trust that I invested in you back. I want it back. Pay me what you owe me. Because again, there's a deficit and there's loss. Then it goes on and it says, his fellow servant fell down and began begging him, be patient with me and I'll pay you back. Both servants in the same situation ask for the same thing. They don't ask for forgiveness. Did you catch that? We're in a conversation about forgiveness. Neither servant ever asks for forgiveness. What do they both ask for? Patience. Again, because they all understand that there's a loss there. So no one's saying, hey, forgive me. That'd be too ridiculous a thing to ask. Hey, go into debt for me. Hey, absorb that loss for me. What would be expected is be patient with me. Give me time. I'll make it up to you. Which is very familiar language for when we know we've done something wrong. And there's not a tendency to go right to forgiveness. It's, I'll make it up to you. I'll go above and beyond. I'll do even better this time. I'll never again. I'll do this. I'll do that. It's, I'll pay you. Just be patient. Give me time to pay you back, and I'll make it up for you. Neither one asks for forgiveness. They ask for patience, like a lot of us do in our relationships. And it says this in verse 30. But he, the servant, wasn't willing. And instead he threw him into prison until he could pay what he was owed. When the other servants saw what had taken place, they were deeply distressed and went and reported to their master everything that had happened. Then after he had summoned him, his master said to me, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Shouldn't you also have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you? And because he was angry, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay everything that he was owed. So also my heavenly Father will do to you unless one of you forgives his brother or sister from your heart. The moral of the story, which you should leave church today with, is forgive or you will be viciously tortured until you do. South Hills, you have a blessed day. We love you guys. Now, before some of you guys fight me and are like, that's what it says. You better forgive or else. Is that producing forgiveness in your life? Really, I really want to ask that question. If that's the interpretation of the text, if the goal for Jesus was that his followers would practice forgiveness, and his method of motivation was do it or else, is that working for you? Because I want to believe that Jesus is a better leader than me, better teacher than me, better motivator than me, had a better understanding of humanity than me, and knew what would and wouldn't motivate them. Shame is not a productive manner of change. And I don't care what church taught you. You can't shame yourself into a beautiful life. If you could, my life would be a lot more beautiful. If shame was a productive method of bringing about meaningful change, I'd be a lot better than I am. Jesus paints a picture of forgiveness, but he's also pointing out the cost of not forgiving. To live a life like this servant and say, everyone has to pay me what they owe me, has its own cost as well. If you live your life demanding that everyone around you pays what they owe, are you not isolated because they can't come close until that debt is settled, and once it's settled, they can come back. And we know that if we haven't let that go, we're less likely to let new people get closer because it's, well, I've lost before, I've given, I've trusted, I experienced debt, so actually I'm not going to give as much in the future because can't have the same thing happen again. That sounds like isolation. And where is there time to live a full and beautiful life while I'm spending all my time making sure that everyone pays me what they owe me? Is that not torture? Because sometimes we can think we're imprisoning other people demanding that they pay us, but the reality is if you do not forgive, if that's a set position, eventually that path leads to I'm imprisoned because I am busy making sure that everyone pays me what they owe me. I will suffer no debts, take no losses. And that's a lonely and isolated way to live. And Jesus points to that. I want to give you 4 different ways that you can engage with forgiveness and the process. But before I do, I'm telling you, I'm going to give you 4 different things. Step 1, or part 1, might be an incredible step of faith, and you don't need to do anything more than that. And in fact, it'd be wrong and unhealthy for you to do more than that. I need you to hear me say that, because I'm going to give you multiple parts of this process, multiple parts of this thing. Some of you guys, it's literally so fresh that you don't need to be down here at the other end of forgiveness. You just need to be at step 1. Can we agree on that? Okay. Part 1 in that process. Can you acknowledge what was lost? Can you acknowledge what was lost? Who took it? When was it taken? Can you do that? Can you name it? Can you say, this interaction at this point with this person? And we'll want to keep it really general. I got hurt by the church. Yes, but I can bet that that church had a name, and so did the leader at that church, or the volunteer who did the hurting. So if the goal is healing and forgiveness, saying the church hurt me is one thing. Being able to acknowledge and say, that leader, when they did this or didn't do that, or they said this or didn't say that, this is what was lost in that interaction. When my friend, when my mom, when my brother, when my sister, whoever it is, can I acknowledge it? Can I name it? And if this is your first time doing that, it's your first time writing it down, it's your first time saying it out loud, it's your first time not only acknowledging the event, but what was lost, that is an incredible undertaking. And you are a brave person to do so. You're brave to do it, and you are on your way to creating space for healing. So again, this might be, here's my step, and this is my only step, because it's my first time naming it, acknowledging it, and to be honest with you, I need time to grieve it. I need time to be sad about it, to be mad about it. I need time to grieve what was lost. This is what was lost. It still breaks my heart. I need time to be upset about it. That's okay. Might be a day, might be weeks, might be months, might be a year, years. That's all right. The second step would be acceptance. Acceptance of what? If we've acknowledged a loss, can you accept what can and can't be paid back? A lot of times we hold people hostage to pay us things they don't actually have a means to pay us. Hey, I want you to give me the time back, but who here has the ability to give time to anyone? Give me the years back. Can they give it back? Do they actually have a means to pay that back? And if they don't, can I accept that? Can I accept what can and can't be given to me? Because if I can make a decision about realistic expectations on what I can get back or not get back, I can move forward. But if I've never actually accepted, you can't give me back the time. You can't give me back what was lost. Then I can make a decision. But if I stay stuck pretending like you can, I never move forward. I never get beyond that. Step 3, ask. This whole morning we've talked about forgiveness and this idea of loss. Third is, if you're someone who believes in God, you're invited to ask that God would restore things that no one has the ability to restore. If you look at what's on your paper and you say, no one can give that back, it's impossible. Perfect, because we're here to ask God to do impossible stuff. If not, then why are we here? If we're here to God, I need you to just make the ends meet. I'm not asking for a lot. God, just make it sort of coincidentally happen. I just need a little bit. Don't do anything too crazy, just do enough. Do something that's reasonable. Guys, you guys got dressed this morning. You're here. You've sat listening to me for 20 minutes. At least ask God to do God stuff. If I'm going to dare to believe that there's a God, creator of heaven and earth, who somehow is everywhere, knows all things, sees all things, is all loving, I might as well ask for some stuff. So ask. Because your job is not to figure out how God is going to do the impossible. It's to say, God, here I am. Here's where it hurts. Here's what I've lost. God, can you, will you make up the deficits that I can't? They can't restore it. I can't restore it. Can you? Will you? I got a little bonus one. The first service didn't like the last step or last part of the process. It's a little bonus, a little extra for you. Number 4. No amens. No one's like, yeah, preach. Apologize. Some of us are so stuck in yeah, they did take that from me. But for all of us, we do have to take some time at some point to acknowledge. And I've taken some things too. I have. I've taken some things. You know what I just hooked you up with if you're married in here? Because I just got a personal pet peeve. I'm not going to see you guys, so I can kind of say whatever. It's second service. We're almost out of here. Is in conflict when someone says sorry without knowing what they're sorry for. It's I'm sorry. For what? You're sorry? Don't actually help me because it don't really mean anything to me because you're just sorry. But about what? You can become an expert. You can become an expert at a good apology by doing, check it out, acknowledging what was lost, acknowledging what happened, acknowledging your role in it, accepting what you can and can't do to fix it. I realized what happened. I realized that when I said it that way, it made you feel small, unimportant. And I know I can't go back and fix it. I know this apology doesn't fix it, but I'm sorry that you as a person I love felt that way because of what I did. Will you forgive me? Man, there you go. That is the pathway we have to walk in order to mend relationships. This is the pathway towards empathy, compassion for one another. Can we walk that way? And we set up this entire spectrum and what it looks like in these different parts of the process. And it's not an easy one to walk through. I think we all sort of know that. But our confidence is that God walks with us through that process, that we are not facing these giant things alone, and that he has the ability to make things beautiful. One of the best things in my life, my literal forever reminder that God is better to us and kinder to us than we deserve, is my wife. She is my frequent reminder that God gives us better things than we deserve. Sometimes you hear people say oh, you become the right person, you find the right person. No. I was a whole mess, and God still gave me my wife. That relationship is only possible with forgiveness, with the releasing of debt. If she demanded that I pay her everything that I owe her, we've been done like 3 months in. I'm already in debt. I ain't got it. Ain't no way to come up with it. My mom gave birth to 2 boys. I'm the older of those 2 boys. Any older siblings in here? Woo! You need people that are going to release you of your debts, because Lord knows you've taken some things that you didn't mean to. Right? I spent my entire life, my parents got divorced. I didn't see my dad. I spent my entire life trying to prove that I didn't need the dad who didn't want me. Hey, you created loss. Yeah, I don't have this, I don't have that, because you were supposed to provide it, and I ain't got it. Well, I'm going to prove that I never needed you in the first place. And I could have held on to that. I really could have. But I would have lost out on the favorite part of my week now, which is hanging out on Sundays after church with my dad. Enduring watching the Raiders, but still, it's time. But it's time. Some of those wonderful parts of my life were only made possible through forgiveness. So I want to pray for you as you sort of find your way through. Where am I? What's my next step? Where do I want to go from here? But I want to pray for you. So let's pray.